Hey everyone, 2022 is right around the corner and I thought it would be fun to make a video about my personal favorite movies of the year, the movies that I found most meaningful. I'll be discussing them in no particular order because I always find it difficult and rather unnecessary to do like a strict ranking, especially when you have such a wide variety of different stories. I also won't discuss any spoilers as I want to encourage you to seek out these films for yourself if you haven't already. Lastly, there's a bunch of movies that I haven't seen yet and probably some that I've missed altogether, so if you have any suggestions after this video, please leave them in the comments below. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Okay, first up, some honorable mentions. The Power of the Dog, directed by Jane Campion. I thought this was an interesting story about masculinity, in particular about the way men who appear strong on the outside can be fragile on the inside and vice versa. It didn't quite connect with me as strongly beyond that, but I feel this could be a movie I'll appreciate more after a second viewing. This is not a burial, it's a resurrection, directed by Lemohang Jeremiah Mosesi. A visually stunning movie about an 80-year-old woman who finds a new spirit of resilience after her village is forced to resettle for a construction project. This is a true art house movie in the sense that it genuinely tries to do something different, and as such it can be a bit challenging. But I believe it's worth checking out if only to broaden your cultural and cinematic horizon a bit. Zola, directed by Janisa Bravo. Probably the first movie adapted from a Twitter thread. Zola is a high-energy, youthful story of the modern age that also has something meaningful to say about how young women can end up in messy and dangerous situations that are not easily escaped from. Spider-Man: No Way Home, directed by John Watts. I'm not the biggest superhero fan, and I'm definitely not a fan of the seemingly constant exploitation of cultural nostalgia. This movie, however, surprised me not only because it brought back some past characters, but also because it managed to do it in such a way that it also brought back some of the past warmth and sincerity, and some genuine emotion. No Time to Die, directed by Cary Joji Fukunaga. Speaking of some genuine emotion, the final Daniel Craig Bond movie moved me a lot more than I expected it would. It's a bit too long and it does stumble a bit trying to connect all the past threads together while also setting up a new villain. But the action, the music, the performances and the direction are top notch and it all comes together quite beautifully in the end. And now for the main course, my favorite movies of 2021. The Last Duel. Directed by Ridley Scott and starring Matt Damon, Adam Driver and Jodie Comer. The Last Duel tells the true story of one of the final judicial duels held in medieval France. A judicial duel implied a battle to the death to settle an accusation in the absence of witnesses or a confession, as it was believed that God would let the truth prevail and favor the one who was righteous. In this case, Jodie Comer's character accuses Adam Driver's character of sexual assault, after which her husband, played by Matt Damon, challenges him to a duel. The movie is divided into three parts: the truth according to the husband, according to the accused, and according to the wife. This in itself I thought was a fascinating structure, much akin to Kurosawa's Rashomon. But the reason this movie is among the best of the year for me is that it is about so much more than different accounts of a crime. The Last Duel is a tale about pride, shame, about status, gender norms, self-righteousness, and the struggle for justice in a system where agency is not divided equally. It's about the subtle yet insidious ways in which we distort reality and in which we can blatantly misconceive and misremember our actions. Combined with the epic scale and Ridley Scott's trademark world building that really brings medieval France to life. This really was an intense and thought-provoking spectacle that unfortunately too few people went to see in the theater. The Green Knight. The Green Knight is the retelling of the medieval Arthurian legend directed by David Lowery. It stars Dev Patel as a somewhat overconfident and reckless knight who takes on a challenge presented to him by the mysterious Green Knight, the consequences of which propel him into a wild and fantastical journey. After seeing A Ghost Story, which I thought was a very contemplative and thoughtful movie about time and grief and about the importance of the attachments we form in our brief lifetimes, I was really excited to see more from this director, and especially a poetic story like The Green Knight seemed to be a perfect fit. And I'm happy to say that I was right. The Green Knight feels like a classic cautionary fairy tale. It's a very archetypal story about hubris, fate and mortality, and the execution of it was just pitch perfect in my opinion. It's a bit of a slow burn, but this for me only enhanced the themes it was trying to communicate, and I really like how Lowery is bold enough to convey the weight of time by actually letting you experience it in its steady yet unrelenting movement. Dev Patel is also fantastic as what is ultimately a pretty fragile character. You know, this is not the kind of knight that's going out and slaying dragons. There's a certain incompetency to him that makes him visibly insecure, but which also drives him to prove himself as a worthy knight and human being. And Dev Patel captured all of these nuances just perfectly. Dune. The long-awaited adaptation of the classic sci-fi novel coming from one of the best sci-fi directors working today, Denis Villeneuve. I watched this in IMAX and it was just an incredible experience. I love the way Villeneuve slowly but surely draws us into this world using amazing set design, special effects, sound design and music. It all comes together just so perfectly, and though I've only read the novel for the first time earlier this year, I don't think we could have wished for a better, more faithful adaptation than the one we got. My only hesitancy with forming a definitive judgment is that it was obviously just part one of a larger story. It has a hard open ending, and a lot of the thematic threads, in particular those of Paul's journey and character arc, remain as of yet unresolved. At the moment, it therefore doesn't quite feel like a complete story yet, and it does at times feel like the movie is just laying the groundwork for the more exciting stuff that is to come in the sequels. But still, for me, it definitely succeeded in immersing me into this world and getting me hungry for more. I love how Villeneuve decided to go big and bold, and yeah, I can't wait to see more. Belfast and the Hand of God. Belfast is the story of a young boy in his working class family in 1960s Belfast and is directed by Kenneth Branagh. The Hand of God is the story of a teenager facing a tragedy and coming of age in 1980s Naples and is directed by Paolo Sorrentino. The reason I'm discussing these movies together is because they are both extremely personal, almost autobiographical projects from their respective directors. And in both cases, this is what I admired the most about these movies. To me, there's always been something unique about filmmakers trying to capture their own lives, and their own childhood especially. It's like they look at such movies differently, and really try to, above all, capture something that was meaningful to them, even though perhaps they did or still do not understand why. In both Belfast and The Hand of God, the power of movies and the impact movies had on these filmmakers from a very young age is clearly reflected. Belfast in particular does some interesting things with color and really shows how heroic fictions and real life sort of blend together in the mind of this young boy. The Hand of God, on the other hand, seems to emphasize the power of movies as a means to escape reality and as a way to cope with hardship and suffering. To be fair, these are not movies without flaws. You see it a lot with personal projects like these, where it becomes especially difficult to kill your darlings and sacrifice personal attachment for a better flowing story. But again, to me, this is also precisely what makes these movies worth watching. They are imperfect accounts of imperfect people, and they feel meaningful because you know they are so meaningful to the filmmakers. And as such, they are flawed in the best possible way. There are plenty more films to discuss, but before we move on, I want to take a brief moment to offer my gratitude to my patrons and everyone who has supported me over the last year, because honestly, I would not be doing this without your help. If you've been following me for a while, you know my videos can be a bit eclectic and all over the place. This year I've, for example, tried to articulate rather intangible feelings like the longing for absolute beauty and the painful helplessness of not being able to help those you love. I've explored sacred spaces in Skyrim, examined the messy meanings of zombie stories, and have done critical reflections on the intersection of stories and more societal issues like vigilante stories and the pursuit for meaningful justice, and the meaning of heroism in a globalized, capitalistic, modern society. I also bought a camera this year to include more of my own footage, which so far has resulted in a philosophical journey into the wild to reflect on nature and our current ecological crisis, and an exploration of empty churches to try and better understand existential cinema and the nature of religion. In short, the YouTube algorithm doesn't always seem to know what to do with my stuff, and to be fair, I can't really blame it. But this is also precisely why I'm so thankful for all of you. You who do not see my videos as a means to an end. You who appreciate my work and want to support it for what it is. You who have given me the confidence that my voice is one that's worth listening to. Thank you. Oh, fun fact, right now we're about 80% of the way to my next Patreon goal, for which I will make a video about my top 50 of essential movies. So if you want to see a list like this, only much longer, and one that includes not just the best films of one year, but of all time, be sure to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/likestoriesofold. You'll also find a bunch of other cool rewards there, like annotated videos, a Discord community, and exclusive Q&A videos. So yeah, feel free to check it out, I'd really appreciate it. Okay, now back to it. Spencer. Spencer is directed by Pablo Larraín and stars Kristen Stewart as Princess Diana, who, during the Christmas holidays with the royal family, struggles with her mental health issues and her marriage to Prince Charles. I really liked Larraín's movie Jackie, which had Natalie Portman shining as Jacqueline Kennedy in the aftermath of her husband's assassination. And here again, he really gives his main actress a stage to perform, and perform Kristen Stewart certainly does. This is easily among the best performances she's ever delivered. The movie rests almost entirely upon her shoulders, and she carries it with total commitment. What impressed me the most, however, was the way in which her struggle with her mental health was depicted. This definitely isn't just a romanticized biography of a beloved historical figure. It really is an exploration into a complex character trying to deal with her inner demons in a restrictive environment that offers little support and in many ways only makes things much worse for her. Just in case you don't know, Princess Diana suffered from an eating disorder, which I think is all too often underestimated as a serious mental disorder that can cause significant suffering. And as such, I greatly admire this film for showing it with the appropriate nuance and honesty and thoughtfulness. Come On, Come On. Come On, Come On is directed by Mike Mills and stars Joaquin Phoenix as a radio journalist who has to look after his nephew for a few days while traveling the country to do interviews for his radio project. I was a big fan of Mills's previous film 20th Century Women, which was a very grounded, very humanistic portrait of everyday people going about their lives, and I was happy to see that he was able to capture that same spirit in this movie too. Come On touches on a variety of themes like parenthood, loneliness, guilt, the way we deal with emotions, the way we look at the future, and although it doesn't go too deep into any subject in particular, this broader approach does manage to communicate something that is more than the sum of its parts. I think that one of the things Mills does best as a filmmaker is communicate the sense that basically no one knows what they're doing, but also that we are all just trying to do our best. It's a simple, optimistic message, but also one that is so easily forgotten, and as such, the reminder, when executed well as it is done here, can be profound. The character work is especially excellent. All the characters feel like real people with complicated personalities, and they are all performed so well with so much nuance and attention. I also particularly loved the inclusion of the little interview clips that Phoenix's character records. It reminded me a bit of a short documentary made by Kieslowski called Talking Heads, in which Kieslowski interviewed a variety of people and asked them two simple questions that pretty much capture what Come On also seems to be about. Who are you and what do you want out of life? Identifying Features. Directed by Fernanda Valadez, Identifying Features follows a mother across Mexico as she searches for her son, whom is said to have died while trying to cross the US border. This definitely was the least fun I had with a movie this year, but I mean that in a positive way, and I guess also as a sort of warning. Because this is an intense, a bleak and a heart-wrenching story about the struggle for answers in a world that doesn't seem to provide any, and even seems to suggest that if it does, it might have been better not to have known. Despite its heavy subject material, Identifying Features is a surprisingly slow-moving and quiet movie. It doesn't spoon-feed you much information, and I liked how the camera really lingers on the main character's face in many interactions. It can be a bit confusing at first because there are multiple characters who are each searching for lost family members, but for better or worse, it all comes together in a satisfying finale with some stunning and harrowing images. Anyways, it's a story that you're probably not going to forget anytime soon. It shows the evils of this world in such a visceral way, but in doing so it also strangely highlights our sort of quiet perseverance. Bo Burnham's Inside. I'm not sure if this technically counts as a movie, but I wanted to include it nevertheless. Inside was written, directed and performed by Bo Burnham over the course of 2020, and so far I think it's been one of the defining art pieces of our lockdown era. As the title suggests, this comedy special was made completely inside and in complete isolation. Or that's the impression it creates. Either way, I think it effectively touches on not only our collective feelings of isolation caused by the pandemic, but also on those caused by other developments like the age of the internet and the seemingly ever-growing need to perform and pretend. And it does all this through clever writing, creative techniques, and some genuinely good songs. The Humans. Directed by Stephen Karam, The Humans tells the story of a family coming together for Thanksgiving, during which tensions slowly rise through a variety of revelations. This movie is based on a play, and you can kind of tell. It takes place in a single apartment over the course of one evening, and only features a handful of characters. However, director Karam uses some subtle cinematic techniques to really make this more than just a play that happened to be filmed. Though having an overall quiet and sober presentation, there are some beautiful shots and compositions that really stand out and help create an atmosphere that feels distinctively cinematic. As for the story itself, it starts off very quietly and slowly, and although it took me a while to get invested, I was utterly immersed by the end. It's a small story that often feels like it isn't about anything in particular, but I think this was sort of the point. As the title suggests, it's a portrait of humanity. It's about the briefness of our being, about the hardships that we face, and about the ways we relate to others while also struggling with ourselves. I particularly like the way darkness is used in the movie, which becomes not only a plot-related element as light bulbs keep breaking in what seems like one of the worst maintained apartments in New York, but it also serves as an effective metaphor for the way death slowly envelops and ultimately consumes us. It may sound a bit grim, but fortunately the movie also offers some light in return, with the quiet perseverance of its titular humans, who seem to carry on no matter how dark things get. Riders of Justice. Riders of Justice is a Danish movie directed by Anders Thomas Jensen and stars Mads Mikkelsen as a soldier named Marcus who returns home to his daughter after his wife dies in a train accident. At least it seemed like an accident until another passenger who survived the crash shows up with his kind of geeky friends and convince Marcus it wasn't an accident but a targeted attack. I must say I wasn't sold on this movie based on the trailer. It seemed like a very typical revenge movie in which some brooding, angry guy goes on a rampage, and the tone also seemed to be all over the place. But fortunately it was much better than I expected. The movie is actually quite funny, light-hearted almost, while also being more serious and thoughtful when it needed to be. What I like most about Riders of Justice is how, and this is probably gonna sound cliché at this point, but is how it is essentially a deconstruction of the revenge genre and the sort of archetype of the manly man avenger. We've seen it before, but I still found this one to be particularly effective. A lot of attention is paid to Marcus's grief and his inability to deal with his emotions, and also to his daughter who is on her own journey to make sense of her mother's death. The supporting characters serve really well here by not just being funny side characters, but actually being well-developed characters that help our main characters grow over the course of the movie, which altogether led to a surprisingly heartwarming conclusion. Pig. Pig is directed by Michael Sarnowski and stars Nicolas Cage as a reclusive truffle hunter who must return to the city he used to live in after his beloved truffle pig gets kidnapped. Like Riders of Justice, I initially expected a more typical revenge story, but fortunately it was so much more than that. Actually, the movie is not about revenge at all. There's not even any violence in it, really. Pig is a movie about grief, and perhaps even more so a movie about passion, about the things we care for, and about how rare and fragile that really is, and about how easily it slips away from us. The movie is set within the restaurant world, a world that is defined both by a deep passion for food, as well as some cutthroat business practices that serve as a great metaphor for our struggle to find something to care about in a world that is quite hostile and ready to take it away from you. There's a great scene in a restaurant where Cage's character confronts a chef who, although widely successful on the surface level, is not in the place he had always dreamed of. And we get this fantastic monologue, which might just be my favorite of the year, about the importance of staying true to ourselves and about the price we pay when we don't. So yeah, the first time I saw Pig, I thought it was really good, and then I saw it again and I realized it was great. The way it slowly draws you into its world, slowly reveals more about the characters, and the thoughtful way it deals with conflict. And it's the first movie of this director too, so yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does next. So yeah, that's it for my favorite movies of 2021. As for 2022, there are a number of films that I'm really looking forward to. Among others, there's The Northman and Terrence Malick's The Way of the Wind, and I discussed those in a separate video that you can find exclusively on Nebula, our creator-owned streaming service where you can watch all my videos without any ads or sponsors and support a community of amazing creators. You can get access to Nebula for free by signing up for CuriosityStream, the streaming service for documentaries and non-fiction titles. Right now, CuriosityStream has a brand new smart bundle that includes not just CuriosityStream and Nebula, but also features One Day University, a great source for academic lectures, Topic, which hosts foreign thrillers and crime dramas, Tastemate, which is all about food, travel and design, and Some TV, a platform dedicated to wine, which is one that I'm particularly excited about as I'm starting a wine course this year. I have some family in France and long story short, they got me hooked. Normally this bundle is $70 for a whole year, but if you use my link, which I'll also leave in the description and the comments below, you can get it for less than $40. So yeah, if you'd rather watch me talk about my most anticipated movies of 2022 instead of me doing this ad, watch some amazing documentaries on CuriosityStream or explore some new streaming platforms. Be sure to head on over to curiositystream.com/likestoriesofold.sb, that's SB for Smart Bundle, to get the smartest bundle in streaming today. Thank you all for watching, Happy New Year, and I wish you all the best for 2022.